U.S., it's context around the world. But what we've always done with PepsiCo Positive is link it to our business. So each of the goals that we have is fundamentally linked to how do we create a more resilient, sustainable business. So think about just one example, agriculture. I mean, PepsiCo's second largest food and beverage company in the world. We have 300,000 farmers in our direct and indirect supply chains because we're about 60% food. So if farmers can't grow food and the food system is at risk in the world, we don't have a business. And so we have increased our regenerative agriculture targets from 7 million to 10 million. We've added, Marissa and I were just talking, we've added a nature component to them. Why? Because it's good for business. It's important. So what we've tried to do is link things to the business. Therefore, the context around some of the noise, some of the change, doesn't matter as much because it's about how do we align what we're trying to do to build a sustainable business and keep it functioning, and in our case, keep food on the table of the world.
None of you, and apologies for putting it like this, but none of you is saying that things are harder as a result of the current context. It's really hard for me to try and squeeze that sort of statement out of anyone here in New York, or indeed any big US company. Are things harder?
Well, maybe I'll go first. What we're trying to do is change systems, and that's something I've talked a lot about already, is how do we create system change? Because each of the three of us as companies are doing a lot of things. The question is, how do we change, again, the agricultural system? And that requires farmers at the center. It requires governments. It requires NGOs. It requires corporates. It requires all society. That has, I think, gotten harder because it's not moving fast enough. We have to actually change the second derivative. We have to accelerate the speed at which we're moving. And that's more challenging because there's not enough people in the system moving against it.
Marissa, again, something we've talked about is, well, the investability of nature, and Jim mentioned nature, but how are you guys, how are the financiers here, how are the banks working together with the PepsiCos and the MasterCards to help them through this process, whether it's the carbon credit space?
Absolutely. So it starts with being mission aligned, so we pick our topics where we do have alignment, and then we figure out ways to collaborate. But we are using the carbon markets as one mechanism to help invest in nature. Maybe I can just give you an example. We've just recently announced, as we all eyes are on Brazil as we move into COP at the end of the year, we just announced an agreement, a jurisdictional carbon credit mandate to sell 5 million credits. So we're mandated as a firm to sell this for the state of Accra. It's the first jurisdictional mandate of size. This is serious scale, 5 million credits. That capital, when those credits are sold, that capital will flow to protect against deforestation and flow money back into indigenous populations who are the stewards of the earth. So that's an example of a market.
And with a layperson's hat on, trying to unravel what that really means, is the fact that Standard Chartered are involved in that project. I guess that allays the concerns of the PepsiCos and the MasterCards when they want to invest in these sorts of things. Is that right?
Yeah. So to a degree, again, mission alignment, but I'm sure if I'm sitting in Jim's shoes, what does he want to do if he's going to purchase carbon credits or for his last mile abatement? He wants to ensure that there's high integrity in those credits, that they do what they say they're going to do. We can be a force for good in that respect as we are helping to set the standards for what high integrity means. And then the combination of us putting our name against it, and partnering up with high quality corporates as partners.
In fact, I mean, we've got Annette Nazareth from the council coming on tomorrow, actually, onto the show tomorrow. Shame she's not around today to talk about this now, because, of course, that integrity piece is so critical for companies like yours. Where are we now on integrity in the carbon markets? The fact that Standard Chartered and other banks are getting involved and, again, as I said, helping allay your concerns helps, but do you feel confident in those markets?
Look, I think the markets continue to evolve. They continue to get stronger, better, higher integrity. We have our Priceless Planet Coalition program, which is a commitment to restore 100 million trees. And we're in the process of transitioning it to a carbon credit program with Conservation International. So lots of work there. But, bigger in terms of the decarbonization picture of what we're all working to do. Some exciting news out of MasterCard this summer when we reported that we grew the company by 12% net revenue and we reduced our emissions by 7%. So carbon credits are good, but how are we actually decarbonizing the actual emissions? And we're making a lot of progress there.
Jim, are your investors really getting this now? Are the institutional investors in the company and others, are they really getting this investability / sustainability message now, would you say?
I think you have a really big range of investors. We have some that we meet with every quarter, and they ask very sophisticated questions. But there's a lot who I think are most interested in the financial performance of the company, what's happening in this quarter, what's happening, and they're less interested in some of the sustainability issues. We invest in the things we do because, again, they're tied to the health of the business, they're tied to the strength of the business. Either we have customers asking for them, we need them for our license to operate, right? Things we need farmers to keep farming. Those are things that are important for the health of the business. I would say not every investor fully appreciates that, and again, you've got a range. We're hopeful over time that will change, but I think it's still very much a work in progress.
And Marissa, I want to come back to the finance piece. We've spoken to Bill a lot, Bill Winters, the CEO at Standard Chartered, a lot about this and the work that you do and the projects you have in developing markets.
Yes.
How's all that going? And are investors here and in Dubai and in Sharm and in Glasgow, are they understanding the urgency and the need properly now of this?
So, again, I think Jim said, you have a broad swath. But back to the investor question, when we look at our investor base, our shareholders in Standard Chartered Bank, which is a proxy for do they understand it and do they care and are they supportive, we've had a wonderful stock reset. I can't claim it's all because of sustainability, but one of our hallmarks was we reached $982 million of sustainable finance income. This isn't, this is income that we produced last year. It was a year ahead of a target that we had to do $1 billion by the end of this year. And the returns on that sustainable finance are higher than the average of our overall bank.
Yeah.
So what we're communicating to our investors is, as Jim says, really good business, but by the way, we're delivering great outcomes. So then when you go to our markets and you touch it and you feel it on the ground, you can see the impact that we're making, that connection with our communities, our regulators, the stakeholders. It's tangible. It's absolutely something that they understand.
Really, really cheeky question to finish up, and it's got to be really brief, the answer from each of you if possible. And this is about New York Climate Week. Do you feel you have to be here this week? Do you feel you have to be seen here, or are you going to leave with something achieved?
Yeah, I think I want to be here, right? Everybody's here. The conversation is here.
But you want to be here because you want to achieve something.
I want to achieve something. I'm looking for new partnerships. We're looking to enable more circularity. So, I mean, Jim and I were just talking about reusable cups and this deposit return scheme and how can we partner. Jim's got some great pilots already happening in some stadiums around the U.S. and we'd like to be a part of that.
Okay.
So this is why we're here.
Okay. Same question to you. I imagine we're going to get the same answer as well.
I want to be here. We want to be here because it's about doing, and this is a target-rich environment. Everybody's here within 10 blocks in any direction. You can meet with anybody you need to. The three of us have already had business conversations standing out in the hallway. That doesn't happen when we're spread around the globe. Critically important, great opportunity. You got to make it happen. It's a 24-hour full contact sport. But if you make it happen, it's a great opportunity.
And like the carbon deal with Accra in Brazil, any big deals you can quickly tell us about before you leave?
How about big themes? I can never talk about big deals until they happen. But big themes, I leave here. We have a very, very serious, talk about doers, roundtable on methane. So we've been talking about carbon emissions forever, but methane as a toxic substance has to be addressed. And the people who are going to be in the room at this roundtable range from big oil all the way through to, what I would call the sort of midstream players, all figuring out how do we set some standards and sign on to partnerships and pledges. And on the financing side, we can actually say that this is good business to capture all of that's going in the atmosphere. And actually, by doing that, you save the company's money. So that's just one example. Another big topic is adaptation finance. We got to get this on the stage as the effects of climate change are hitting. We need private capital to flow, and we're crowding in so many people on that topic, too. So these are the sorts of things that we're rolling up our sleeves getting into.
Well, look, I wish you the best of luck. We'll be watching. And hopefully see you all in Brazil as well. All right. So to Ellen, to Jim and Marissa, thank you very much indeed for coming in. Hope you have a fruitful week this week. Right, plenty to come. She's covered climate change from the streets of New Delhi to the shores of the Caribbean. Katy Daigle is Reuters climate editor. She cuts through greenwashing, decodes policy, spotlights the stories that matter most. Also coming up, the most influential European voice on climate change and two climate leaders optimistic about what's to come despite the headwinds. All of that is coming up.
At a time when truth and new ideas have never been more important, Reuters Next examines the big issues without fear or favor to get a clearer picture about what lies ahead.
Reuters Next Gulf will provide a forum to ignite real change and to build a better tomorrow for generations to come.
Join us at Reuters Next, because in a time of great change, the most important question is, what's next?
Welcome back, everyone. Katy Daigle is our environment and our climate editor and joins me for Katy's Corner. You've got your own patch here, Katy, which is very exciting. Let me start by asking you whether there's been any big news for you out of this event so far. I mean, I know it's only been going a couple of days, but what's excited you most?
What's interesting this year so far is the messaging is very positive. I mean, the guests you've had today have been talking about the energy transition underway, including decarbonization. And this messaging right now toward reassuring the world that we are still on mission, it's coming at a good time for the world. People are scared. Warming is speeding up. We are, of course, waiting for news tomorrow, which is when the governments will be announcing their new climate pledges. And
it looks like, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah?
Yes, that's of course because that's the day at the General Assembly the climate piece sits in that. It looks like we're going to be a little bit disappointed. We've got Teresa Ribera coming up on the show. Murmurings are that it's going to be anemic. What are you hearing?
Similar. It's very much a wait and see, but this is the tough part of the energy transition. It's messy. A lot of governments are struggling to reach agreement within, amongst themselves about what to do. Energy security is a big concern, and this is sort of the inflection point we're in, the energy transition. Right? It can be true that we're going gangbusters with renewables at the same time that we're squeamish about getting rid of fossil fuels. Both can be true at the same time.
You and I have talked about this before. Climate, when things were really bad on the multilateral sort of stage, the sort of the global collaboration and discussion, climate used to be a bit of a bright spot, didn't it? It doesn't look like it's that bright spot anymore. It seems to me that Europe is going its way, China's going its way, the BRICS are going their way, the US is clearly going its way. Is multilateralism dead in this space as well?
It's hard to say. When the UNFCCC was signed, it was, fun fact, the first treaty that was signed by nearly all governments in the world. That was a showcase in multilateralism. And since then, the treaty has helped governments achieve quite a lot of progress in terms of moving money toward climate projects, getting the decarbonization agenda on the table, moving renewable energy. But it's tricky. And now we're seeing, as Teresa had said and Christiana, that the driving force is not so much the governments and policy, it's the real economy. Yeah. It's the companies that are facing, they're facing a need to change.
When you hear PepsiCo and MasterCard and Standard Chartered and other corporates, speak to us and in an incredibly bullish way about what's going on. What do you feel about that? Is there? I ask this delicately, but how much greenwashing is still going on, and where is that seen most by a reporter and your team?
It's not so much greenwashing. I mean, when we talk about the word greenwashing, there seems to be a sort of sinister thought behind it. It's, sometimes there might be some omission, right, which you can say is good or bad. Obviously, companies are going to be showcasing their good works more than the things they're struggling with. There's a lot more that companies could be doing, as well as governments, as well as each of us individually. But what is clear is that companies are very concerned about their viability in the future. And that's not going away.
No. Do you feel, just to finish up with, do you feel as a journalist, one of your responsibilities is to hold the corporates and the financial institutions accountable for their climate claims? Is that a big part of what you do, and how good are we at that?
It's really tough. The news is moving very fast. And so just by virtue of trying to, we can't cover everything all at once. That said, we live for, us journalists live for holding, holding truth to account, making sure that people, citizens, have the information they need to make rational decisions about their society and their future. Where we start to run into trouble is when we're looked at for offering the prescription, right? Is it our role to advise people on what they should do with their investment? Is it our role to say this is a good policy or bad? And that's where there's a sort of a range of feelings. There's a lot more activism in some areas of journalism. Other areas want to play it, straight down the line. Or it is just very, very much straight down the line. We want to hold a mirror up to the world and really help everyone kind of see what's coming.
Well, look, Katy, it's been great. I'm really excited. I know you've got to rush off and you've got lots to do, but I am really excited. You're going to come back onto the show, maybe later today, hopefully tomorrow. I want to find out who you've been talking to, what we should be watching. But, Katy, thank you very much indeed. Right, coming up in just a moment, one of Europe's most influential voices on climate and energy. From the Green Deal to energy security, what is next for Europe's climate ambitions? And can Europe and other countries stand by their bold emissions-cutting promises in time for COP30 in Brazil? First, though, back quickly to Christiana Figueras. We've talked a lot about her already today. I asked her how important big proclamations will be at this COP.
We are now to the point where we don't necessarily need big international agreements coming out of the COPs. This is a COP where you will not see one big result negotiated among national governments. We're now moving from that which we are used to an implementation phase that is going to be very evident at COP30, which is no longer one big result, but rather a multiplicity of solution spaces, coalitions, efforts of many different stakeholders working together that are proof points of the fact that we are moving forward in the decarbonization of the global economy. A very different dynamic for COPs, this COP and further COPs.
To talk about that and to talk about plenty more is Teresa Ribera, Executive Vice President of the European Commission for a clean, just and competitive transition, and of course a driving force behind the European Green Deal. Very nice to see you. Thank you so much for coming on to our show here at Reuters. Look, I want to start, I'll come on to what Christiana was saying there about COP in just a moment, but let me just come on to Europe and Europe's targets. There is clearly disappointment with the latest statement of intent, I think it was called, out of Europe on the NDCs. Some have said it's a missed opportunity because so many countries look to Europe when setting their own NDCs. Teresa, how united is Europe on its climate goals right now?
Oh, I think that it is united because this message is that we intend to fulfill our commitments and our pathways. And the discussion is how to combine the competitiveness measures so to come up with a consistent pathway to the full decarbonization that is targeted by 2050. And I think that, yes, sometimes that we knew already, maybe different views on how to address the different policies, the different measures, but the message is pretty clear. We are there. There are still lots of things to do. But the commitments and the expectations towards Belém remain untouchable.
So you don't sense any rowing back on commitment among members in Europe?
Well, I sense that there are some political families stating, as it is the case here in the United States, that climate can wait for us. Yeah. And I'm convinced that this is such a big mistake. But not only for climate reasons, of course, it is a big mistake. Yeah. Not only for social reasons, of course, it impacts people. For economic reasons, it's just madness. It's committing suicide.
But you just put Europe in the same sort of breath as the US in this space. A few years ago, we were proudly holding up Europe and China and the BRICS as the trendsetters and the pace setters. Do you not feel like that anymore?
Yes, I think that we can feel this way, of course. We have those things that allow us to say that we are very well positioned to overdo in our targets by 2030. We are combining things that will come up so to ensure that we will get as much as possible by 2035, knowing that we are in the middle of this energy transition, that much needs to be done still in Europe, but that the identification of industrial success with the deep decarbonization coming up with the companies is already there. And I think that it is normal that once the low-hanging fruit are already there, we enter into a new phase where we need to assess, because it is a little bit more difficult, it is a little bit more demanding, but yes, we are committed to keep on doing.
I asked Sarah Ladislaw earlier, who's now RMI, worked for Joe Biden, whether she thought there is a chance the US might pull out of the UNFCCC treaty. Do you think there is a chance that they will? And what would that mean for the treaty? How damaging would it be for the treaty?
I think it could be terrible news for the humankind. I think that we need to work together. I think that this is a product of the joint efforts being developed by the whole international community, including the United States. I think that the Paris Agreement responds to these expectations of how we can build on our own premises the best way to achieve the goals. And I think that that could mean that the United States accepts being isolated when compared to the relations to the rest of the world.
Given what we've seen so far with Paris, is this likely to happen?
It is quite shocking to see that a country that has been respected, the House of Freedoms, liberties, rights, improvements, cooperation, technology breakthroughs, decides a kind of suicide. So to be isolated, to forget about the rest of the world, and of course this means leaving the space for the others. And of course there are others that could be delighted to fill in this space. So it is quite shocking, but my main message in this concrete point is that we hear with great expectation and hope all those saying that America is all in, and that mayors, business communities, governors know that they need to bet in the future instead of burning fossil fuels.
And I'm glad you raised that, actually, because tomorrow's show, we've got a bunch of mayors coming on. We have the AG of California coming on. So we are going to talk about that influence at the subnational level, which is clearly critical. Let me ask you, Teresa, China is clearly a massively important player in this space. Brazil. Who are you talking to here in New York over the next couple of days? Tomorrow is a big day, of course, for climate. Have you got any bilaterals set up? I'm not certain that you're going to tell me, but who is Europe meeting with here to try and move this process forward?
I have got several meetings, and I will still have different meetings, but let me come back to China, because you mentioned China. I was to China to beginning of July, and we came up with a very relevant statement being signed by the leaders of the European Union and China, saying loud and clear that we commit to keep on doing as much as possible according the Paris Agreement rules, because we understand that climate action is critical not only for multilateralism but also for our own societies and our own economies. China is changing the way they consider their position in the international context. We consider that we cannot rely on something that we do not produce as fossil fuels. So I think that this shows to what extent, if we manage to remain united, well, a pity that a big country as the United States decides to leave, but the rest will keep on doing.
Quickly running out of time, but you mentioned the meeting with China in July. How harmonious are those discussions? Because we talk about multilateralism, and it used to be the bright spot in this climate space, and we wonder now whether it still is, and that there is a lot of falling out happening. How is the collaboration with China, with Brazil, with the others?
Of course, we are all different, and we are entering into a kind of multipolar world. And there are things where we agree and things where we do not agree. But climate action is a market driver. It's a financial driver. It is a technology driver. And we all agree that it is also a driver for peace or war, for suffer or prosperity. And there we can find ourselves in the same place.
And just very quickly, Europe's NDCs will be laid out by the time COP happens, yes?
I hope so. I think sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think that it will be solved in the coming weeks. So I think that we will be in a position to be taken into consideration.
Well, I look forward to speaking to you in Belém about that. Teresa, thank you very much. And I know you were part of the opening ceremony yesterday, and I'm just going to throw to a few other bits and pieces at the opening ceremony. Lots of voices, actors, politicians, Mr. Steele, of course, of the UNFCCC. This is what they had to say.
The public's already there. But it's a fear of this paradigm that we're living in, where we have a president who's denying climate change, and we have a fossil fuel industry that's just completely gone off the rails with lies and throwing money at this issue and fear. But if there's nothing else that this moment requires from any of us, is to drop our fear and to speak up and speak about what we know is true.
My most important message today is don't believe the doomsters and the gloomsters and the naysayers who say the world is somehow moving away from climate action and clean energy. It's not the case.
The complexities of getting them to agree based on a consensus-based process is difficult, but it is delivering. What COP30 presents us with an opportunity to do is, first of all, removing this preconception that every COP must deliver everything. I think those are expectations that we set that aren't the most helpful.
So a few of the voices that we heard yesterday at the opening ceremony. Now, to wrap up today's show, we hear from two people who bring deep insight into what's working and what's not, and what's next for business in the climate transition. Peter Backer is president of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, a global coalition of CEOs committed to building a net zero, nature-positive economy. Good to see you again, Peter. And Mindy Luber is president of sustainability non-profit Ceres, spent decades mobilizing investors and corporate leaders to align capital with climate action. I guess, I've reached that point where a show like this isn't really a show like this unless Mindy Luber is on it, actually. and the same goes for you as well, Peter. And look, I read your Forbes piece recently, and I've seen a piece you did, I think, for Reuters. You're both surprisingly optimistic. Is this you try to keep a straight backbone despite all the headwinds being thrown at you?
There's no question. Let's start with it is a more difficult time than it was last year or the year before that. That said, what I am seeing every single day in the private sector is good news. No, they don't want to raise their hand and do big public campaigns. There's some pressure on private sector leaders. But in fact, behind closed doors within their corporations, they are staying the course. They are setting goals and meeting those goals. Many are supporting policy. We're seeing a rise in renewable energy, unlike anything else. And so the fundamentals are still there. When Morgan Stanley or PwC poll their members, 90% say they are staying in sustainability. They're going to continue putting resources into it. In fact, they think they'll put more in next year. So I don't want to be fooled that all the negative news is really what's happening. There is negative news, but there's much positive.
Okay, so the business case has never been stronger, I guess, is the message from both of you. And we see that. There is a lot of evidence, and we hear that from all the corporates. Let's talk about the policy bit, though. And Peter, investment is flowing into countries and sectors offering, I guess, the right mix of enabling conditions. Yep. Is that list of countries getting shorter and shorter? And where would you put? We just heard from Teresa at the Commission at the Europe. Are you worried about what's happening in Europe?
Well, I think Europe needs to sort itself out. Europe has two conversations going. One is the competitiveness conversation, and the other is around the Green Deal and what to do with that. I think what is missing in that conversation is what is the link between those two. Because if you go to India, if you go to Southeast Asia, China, the whole conversation is if we want to make our economy competitive, we need to drive sustainability. We need to drive to net zero. So I always say, the world is a whole lot bigger than the USA. Europe needs to sort itself out, but Asia is at this point in time the driver for change. Yeah.
Are you worried about Europe as well? I mean, yes, we mentioned China, yes, we mentioned India, yes, we mentioned Brazil, the BRICS in general, ahead of Belém in Brazil, of course. But are you worried about what's going on in Europe?
There's no question there's a little more tentativeness than we would like to see. On the other hand, the understanding within Europe of citizens, of voters, of policymakers, of the gravity of climate change and the need to address it, nobody's debating that. And so I believe that it will land in the right place. And even in the United States, and yes, we all read the headlines, and it is true, there's so much being pulled back at the federal level. A week ago in California, we stood with the governor and with legislatures in passing the cap and invest law, extending laws. So there is still work to be done at the states, and we'll be there to do it.
I'm glad you mentioned California. We have Rob Bonta coming on tomorrow morning. And I think one of the questions we will be asking is, clearly there's a massive impetus there, but just how are you banging your head against a closed door, given the fact that when it comes to legislation, anything is going to really be overturned at the end of the day?
Well, we are learning that everything gets litigated in the United States now. Laws pass, lawsuits are filed. It seems to be the way of the world. But many of those lawsuits are prevailing. So the big issues at the federal level, they cannot be denied. And I do believe that companies and investors are concerned about losing tax credits, about losing the EPA's authority to regulate climate change. They have spent 20 years, if not more, retooling, getting ready to deal with the world of climate change and the regulations that deal with it. It is very destabilizing for anyone in the private sector to all of a sudden be told, no, climate change is not a problem. So I think we're seeing even more private sector leaders prevailing on states, and hopefully we'll have some action at the federal government, but that's a long stretch.
Drew Bond, Peter, from C3, came on at the start of this show and said, this administration may be the best thing that's ever happened to climate. I mean, it seems a little bit of a stretch to me, given what we've heard. But what can industry leaders do to keep up the pressure on federal government?
Well, I think the first thing is to be in COP30 in Belém. Brazilian presidency is putting together a program which is basically not about negotiations anymore, but the COP of implementation. So what are the solutions? What are the barriers to scale those solutions? Is it policy, finance, is it demand? And then really drive that conversation into action. You talk about policy, but what I see happen is it's now become an economic conversation. We yesterday launched the CEO Handbook for Physical Risk Assessment in supply chains. The economic cost of inaction are now becoming clearer and clearer, and that will force business to act. But if we can get an implementation conversation in Brazil, then it will be. And the thing that government needs to do is stimulate demand for the solutions. That's the one thing they need to do.
Yeah, and Mindy, I mean, you and I have talked, often over the last few years, and I got to say, I sense an optimism from you that I haven't seen in a few years. I guess it's as a result of that sort of thing that Peter's saying. And are you going to Belém? Are you going to COP? If you can get there?
Yes, or likely I will send a team, and either I will go or someone will go.
And what do you want to see happen?
We want to see exactly what Peter said. We want companies and investors to be leaning in on the need to move forward. I mean, the reality is the clean energy economy is the future of our economy, period, end of story. That's where we're going to see jobs. That's where we're going to see profits. That's where we're going to see the ability to fuel the new AI and everything else coming on board. So if we're continuing to see, which I am, businesses and investors putting money into the clean energy economy, moving forward on their goals, standing up on policy, less than I would like, but certainly still doing that, I think we've got a shot because the numbers are so clear. The numbers of risk, hundreds of billions of dollars spent on the impacts from climate. We can't continue spending hundreds of billions of dollars a year. I think companies, insurers are starting to see that and act because of that.
I'm going to have to finish it there, Mindy and Peter, but thank you very much for coming in. But just stay there for a second, because I do want to play one more soundbite from Christiana Figueres, and it talks to the logistics and the difficulty of the COP happening in Belém. But it was actually quite interesting what she had to say, because of course there has been so much debate, so much hand-wringing, so much criticism over the decision to host the meeting in Belém. Tough to reach, tough to find affordable accommodation, and as a result, tough for many to attend. This is what Christiana said about it.
It's a tough location. It is an important symbolic location to be in the Amazon. Let us remember the importance of the Amazon to our global environmental stability. So they have chosen to locate this for symbolic reasons, very important symbolic reasons, in Belém. That does mean that the logistics are difficult, challenging. They are working on those challenges, and they have definitely improved in many different respects with regard to accommodation and prices, and they are continuing to do so. But one has to ask, what is more important? Is it about ease of logistics, or is it about sending the right messages?
So I'm going to leave everyone with that question. Mindy and Peter, thank you very much for joining us. We're going to pick all of this up again tomorrow morning. Our focus tomorrow will be on leadership at the subnational level. As I just said, Rob Bonta, California's Attorney General, will join us, as will several city mayors. We'll talk carbon credits and the importance of transparency and integrity in that market with Annette Nazareth. And we'll be joined by investors and tech companies striving to drive climate ambition. It'll be an exciting show. Do join us at 8:30 tomorrow. Good job, guys.